Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coming in Hot with Abby Baird. I am your host, Abby, and I'm so excited for today's show and to be able to talk about something that I think is really important and kind of a really changing topic, which is about emotions in the workplace. But before we get into there, as the audience comes in and as y'all get settled, just let me know in the chat where you're from, where you're tuning in from, and then just questions you have. This is really the goal of this show is to be really interactive. So let us know what questions you have, especially with it being such a really fun topic. But for those of you who have never joined, Coming in Hot is all about the next generation of business. I'm in supply chain, so specifically supply chain management, but what the next generation and this incoming group of people in business and supply chain is doing, the characteristics, what they're changing, goals, and everything under the sun. And so let me know what questions you have, and I'm so excited to get into this topic. So, whenever I was thinking about emotions in the workplace and how I think that's a really ever changing topic, and I think a huge part of that is because of this new generation. I knew exactly who I had to have on. So, with that being said, may I welcome to the stage Hilary Primac. Hey, Hilary.
Hi, Abby.
I was for a second going to go down this whole introduction and explain who you are, where you went to school, all your passions, but I just figured why share it when you can share your own story. So let us know, the audience included, just your story, who you are, what you're about. We want to learn all about you. So I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here as well. And as Abby so nicely introduced me, my name's Hilary Primac. I live in Chicago. I went to undergrad at the University of Delaware, focusing on human services, but then also was interested in disability studies and organizational leadership and public policy. So that sort of background in my undergrad took me to the University of Southern California for grad school, where I got my master's in social work, focusing on what's called the macro level, which is more program development, grant writing, running an organization versus directly providing therapy or services. And that was definitely an interesting path to take, realizing that you could theoretically do this with an MSW, but in practicality, when it came to entering the workforce, that wasn't the reality for me. And I have worked in higher ed, running a master's program, and then discovered there that I was really passionate about what some people will call the customer journey, but like the journey that someone goes through to either attend a university or buying a product or a service, whatever it may be. And I knew that I wanted to dive more into that.
That's awesome. I think that's so incredible. And I think our audience, as they continue to join and they watch this, I think they're going to really resonate with that because even though you may not have a supply chain background, I think what they're going to resonate and what's really valuable to this discussion we're going to have is that your career path is not traditional. You have a master's in social work, and now you're focusing on the customer experience and marketing, and that's a non-traditional route with your education. And I think so many people in supply chain, especially with supply chain being a much newer industry, they're going to resonate with that because so many people just either fall into supply chain or they don't have supply chain based education. So many people just kind of happen upon supply chain. And so I know our audience is going to resonate with you. But also, I think that I feel like that background is like critical for how business is changing and how it's starting to evolve, and especially with the customer experience. I feel, and I'll obviously let you speak more about this. I have so many questions for you, but it's being able to. I feel like that gives you leverage and an advantage to actually understand the consumer and to understand who they are, what they want, but also like their motivations behind what their purchasing behaviors, their desires, and being able to look at your consumer, at your coworkers, at your organizational leadership from a holistic standpoint, understanding who they are rather than just being there for the sake of business functions or the P&L. So I love that your path is a little untraditional and that you get to bring in different parts of education in life that not a lot of people in business have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think how do you, and I have so many questions, but how do you see how you use that like education in your day to day, and just whether that be connecting with your coworkers or the product that you're pushing out, having that understanding of the human being and of emotions and kind of just your whole background. How do you see that in your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it provides me with a very different perspective, as you alluded to. I tend to think about what are they feeling? What problem are we solving? How can I talk about that? What can we do to address that? So, for example, if I see someone on social comment like, oh, I'm experiencing XYZ problem, well, that's an opportunity to go to our product team and say, hey, this is what people are literally saying. We should try to figure out a way to address it. And then when it comes to coworkers, I have always had the mentality that you should always appreciate every single person that you come in contact with, because you never know when you'll be in crunch mode and will potentially need to pull on that relationship that you have to be able to get something done quicker than it normally would, or to sort of bend the rules depending on what the situation is.
Yeah.
And so just always, always, always building relationships with people, because they're the ones that will help you when you are in a crisis.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is such a good point. One I didn't even think about, but I mean, I'm going to use the word networking, but it's so much more of that is just like having like the emotional maturity and emotional like intuition and presence in your day-to-day work life that's going to allow you to have empathy and build relationships. And that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation, because I think historically, the business space has been seen as a place, or it's business, not personal. And there's the level of emotions have not necessarily been welcomed. But to your point, the way we interact with people on our day to day, in our network, in our organizations, in our personal life, I feel like that emotional component is absolutely critical and it's necessary, because that's where we're going to gain human connection, and human connection ultimately, I feel like, is going to allow us to progress in our careers as personal individuals, and then just also being able to progress in relationships. And when we look at professional growth, those are what we need in professional growth is we need strong relationships. we need networking. We need a really strong product. We need to have interpersonal skills, like all these things that are necessary for us to grow and to, depending on your view of success, it's talking to you and seeing how business is shifting. It seems that emotion is is almost like the key to success, being able to unlock your emotion and use it effectively. So
Yeah.
oh, there's just so much. So what, and I this is a broad question, so we and I can talk about it, but what do you think, like, what can you explain what even is emotion? Like, what does that look like in our lives?
Yeah. I mean, a simple definition would be our feelings, whether you're happy, sad, angry, frustrated, depressed, anxious, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the bare minimum. But then
Yeah.
if you dive into that a little bit deeper, you can think about how spaces make you feel, or how an email or a social post resonates or doesn't. Do you think that the tone was off, or the wording wasn't appropriate? Whatever it may be, all of those to me tie into emotion and how someone could feel about the team, the company, the product, service, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all things to think about when doing something, whatever the action may be.
Yeah, it sounds like just being really mindful of our experiences,
Yeah.
and just being really in touch with what we're experiencing. And I feel like that's really important to be able to understand and label that so we can therefore move forward in whatever experiences we want, whether that is redefining what a work relationship looks like, whether that be creating effective boundaries in our lives. Maybe you just want to go into a different department or you want a completely different industry. Um, I think we just have to understand. How do you
Yeah.
think, I guess I would say organizations as a whole have used, or just how they see emotions in the workplace? How have they done that in the past and versus maybe the present? And I can let you choose whatever timeline you'd like, but I'd love to know like the pros, the cons, and just the general change of that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say anything pre 2020 was sort of, I mean, for so many reasons, I would say it was more business as usual, and just like getting the work done. You work however many hours you need to. What is the social life? What is health?
Hmm.
All of those things. And you saw it more in the tech space where they were acknowledging work life balance, and with some companies trying to bring in services to the business setting so that way people wouldn't be as stressed out about going to the doctor or getting a haircut or whatever sort of errand or appointment it may be. But then when 2020 happened, specifically February, March, um, we saw the world shut down, and we saw so many different industries that potentially weren't as valued before that should have been, really have to rise to the top and deal with things when the entire world was in a crisis. You also saw a lot of social justice issues coming to the forefront and people realizing what diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility should look like in a workspace, and how business as usual before didn't necessarily acknowledge those things or create a space where people could truly be themselves. And so working from home for a lot of people and companies made people actually feel like humans, versus like robots serving some greater purpose and could just plug away. I mean, we were seeing people's kids and people being sick or having to help their kids with schoolwork while working, or pets going across the screen. And so I think that started to make people and companies realize that we're all human. Like, we all have lives outside of the office, whatever it may look like. And I mean, there have been so many discussions since then about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, or how to get mothers to return to the workplace, because we all saw what the cost of childcare looked like before, and now what it's looking like after, when we're having all of these shortages. And so I think it really allowed us, from a business sense, as well as the world, to see the gaps in the workforce and what opportunities maybe weren't as valued before that we should have. Because, I mean, if you think about even the restaurant industry, there are signs for help wanted everywhere, and places are closing or changing hours because of staffing shortages. And pre-pandemic, I don't think we ever would have thought about that. Like, our favorite places may have to close or move or change their menus or schedules due to supply chain issues and staffing shortages. Like, these were things that we just didn't think about, all of the ramifications of different actions. And I think it's at least creating the awareness now. So when you do go to a restaurant or the doctor's office, you can at least really appreciate what these people do and what they've had to endure the last couple of years, and even beforehand, when we should have appreciated them even more.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything you say. I can't, because it's just so true. And some things that I took from what you were saying is that all these recent events, as of late, I think it gave people permission to be more vulnerable, to be more authentic, to have awareness of themselves and of other and those around them. And I think just in total, like, just be empathetic. Your sweatshirt says empathy, just so perfect. But to have empathy for people and to give ourselves grace. And I mean, I know for the people who have tuned into Coming in Hot before, this is not a topic we shy away from, but how the last couple of years, like, one, it has affected our global supply chain in so many capacities. And I don't think we can even speak about emotions without acknowledging mental health and how it's challenging for everyone, every single person, but we are in Let's Talk Supply Chain. So for supply, you mentioned that this brought attention to industries and workers who may not have received the attention, the thanks, the grace, XYZ prior to this. I think that's huge for supply chain, because I think the expectation prior to all of these components was that, to your point, business as usual, that our metrics should consistently be hitting in the target, and that that was just the expectation. And then we've seen this shift from our supply chain being pretty stable to just having it being very reactive and very in the moment. And I think that requires an emotional response.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it has to. And I know I have heard in my experience just throughout my whole career is don't make an emotional, and just even life, like, as human beings, we're told, like, don't make emotional decisions. Don't make this decision based off emotion. But I think we have to bring emotion into our decision. We have to have this holistic understanding of where we're at in order to make effective decisions that are best going to serve us as individuals, but also be able to progress in our careers, progress our benefit our roles and the people we work with and the relationships we have.
Yeah.
And also, I loved your point about what you brought about not just COVID, but social justice, working at home. Like, there's a lot of really hard things that are going on and just a lot of change in this world. And how prior no one was bringing this emotional component. Like, I know this is hard for you. Like, this is so challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that there is even an effective way for organizations to address these issues or relate to their team members without bringing an emotion? Do you think that's even effective? And is there a time where people should really not use emotion?
I'm going to say, as a very empathetic human, that emotions should be involved with every decision.
Yeah.
I mean, I think companies should acknowledge what's happened, and if there are holidays that have more recently come to the forefront of what places are giving as time off, or acknowledging that the past couple of years have been really stressful. Let's give mental health days where the entire company shuts down. No one can think about emails or work problems. You do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better. I think that those things have become really important because again, it humanizes your employees, and it also makes people feel included that maybe once didn't feel like that. So whether it's celebrating Juneteenth or as I said, mental health days, just having these days that are important for recognizing different ways to important for recognizing different things that have come to light the past couple of years.
Yeah, and what I was thinking is that, especially talking to you, I feel like I've come to the conclusion that emotions, the same way I think supply chain should touch every part of the business, I think emotions should touch every single part of the business, because that way, from my perspective, organizations are viewing me and team members as a human and as
Yeah.
someone who is imperfect, who may have bad days, who has days where I'm really excited. And so I think that needs to be acknowledged. But another reason I think it's crucial that we, as individuals in our workday, we have empathy and we try to connect with the people we work with emotionally, but also I think organizations should meet their consumers and their team members with emotion, is that because I think a lot of the emotions we feel, especially when they are considered negative, can be very isolating. And it's, oh my, and so your point, like mental health days or or new holidays that are reflective of where our society's at right now, is if we don't talk about it and if organizations don't start the conversation, then people are going to feel incredibly isolated in their
Yeah.
jobs and in their lives, because emotions connect us, because emotions allow us to build relationships and they allow us to grow and they evolve. And whenever we sit in those alone, it hurts us. It hurts our mental health. It hurts our performance. It hurts our relationships. And so that's kind of what you made me think. I'm like, the more and more I feel like we talk about it, and that's why I think it's important we have these conversations, is because I'm now like, wow, this is kind of a no brainer. Like, like, we should be having these conversations. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely. Do you think that this, as younger people enter the workforce, do you think they are going to bring these type of conversations and these type of relationships and increase and change how emotion is viewed and used? Do you think what do you think the impact of that is?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that younger generations are going to bring in more openness to who people are, whether it's in terms of what's defined as professional dress, or tattoos, or the way you're feeling. Just having that openness and acceptance, I think, is something we're seeing younger generations already have. So I think that will start trickling into the workplace more and more as they enter. But I think, and we saw this a bit during the pandemic and with all of the interesting things that have gone on with the job market, is mass exoduses where people are saying the culture isn't doing anything for me, whether it's making me afraid of failing because I'm going to get fired, or people hearing microaggressions about different topics. Whatever it may be, I think that they're also going to have to realize that from a leadership perspective in order to be able to draw in the younger generations and solve problems that maybe they once were like, oh, like this isn't a problem. And now we're like, glaring red flag. This is a major problem. You need to deal with it in order to survive.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. I think we have to be so conscious. We have to be so cognizant of the fact that everything's changing, and that's, yes, we had a global pandemic that's going to change everything, but also life's just constantly changing. How we view the world is constantly changing, and we should want to kind of have. I feel like we should want that openness of allowing our lives and our world to change. I think a huge thing I just took from what you said is that emotions just truly and ultimately allow us to be authentic, and they allow us to be ourselves. And I feel like if you were to ask so many people, what do you want in a job? What do you want in a work life culture? In a work culture, they would say, oh, well, I want to be able to feel like I can be myself. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge common theme. I want to be myself. And I think the way we unlock that and a way we enable and give ourselves permission to do that is by understanding our emotions in the workplace and being able to express them and carry them, and simultaneously allow and identify and understand and feel those emotions, and give ourselves the permission to advocate for ourselves when we need to. Everything's constantly changing. Our supply chain's constantly changing.
Yeah,
and so
we need to be agile.
You have to be agile. And so I think with that, we have to give ourselves permission to utilize emotion as a resource in business. And up until now, I think it's something that has been viewed with skepticism and caution. And we don't have time for this, but especially women in the workplace, that might be a part two, just to cover that, about women in the workplace and how we have to be that much more mindful of the emotion we share. But I think my closing thoughts, just from everything we've talked about, is that emotions are critical for us to be authentic, and we have to be authentic in order to succeed and to build relationships and to grow and to have just a fruitful work experience and a fruitful life experience. But wow, Hilary, simply not enough time. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you to everyone who's able to join. Like I said, there really may need to be a part two, because I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg. But
yeah, I would love that.
Yes, of course. And thank you to Ships and Let's Talk Supply Chain and AJ for helping put the show on. But Hilary, I appreciate you so much making time, and this was so good, and I hope that our audience agrees. So thank you again, and everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining.